Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the Asus Vivobook S15 OLED. Let's get into the review. By far, the detail I like the most about the Vivobook S15 is its industrial design. It's really nice. I mean, an all-silver laptop is hardly anything new. I feel like I've reviewed a couple of thousand of those over the years. But for the most part, Asus nails the brief of producing a laptop that feels premium, thin, light, and robust. In display terms, we're talking a 16.7-inch 2880 by 1620 120Hz capable OLED with a 16:9 screen ratio, which does rather suggest that Asus wants you to watch movies on it as much as your boss might want you to work on it. One potential issue here for some users is it's not touchscreen capable at all, if that matters to you. You get a generous allotment of ports with dual USB-A on one side, dual USB-C on the other side, along with microSD card reader, HDMI, and a combo microphone headphone jack. It's nicely thin for a laptop of its size, and at 1.42 kg, it's also said to be light. You get a full-size keyboard, including a shrunken number pad at the side. And look, yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve with keys this small, but it's mostly well laid out. I appreciate the fact that they've actually left some space around the cursor keys, for example, because not every laptop does that when they try and cram everything in. So all of this I do like. There is one small design feature I'm not so keen on, and that's the backlit keys. And that's partially because the keys themselves are silver and the default pattern is kind of bright. It can often, at some angles, just lead to keys that are actually visually hard to see. Now, I touch type, not so much of a drama for me, but when I'm trying to find a key, if I am, yeah, it was kind of rough. And I ended up actually disabling the backlighting because it was doing what backlighting shouldn't do. Backlighting should make it easier to see things, and this most distinctly was not. When it comes to Copilot Plus machines, to date, you've really only had the choice of Qualcomm's Snapdragon X Plus or Snapdragon X Elite processors. It's the latter high-end silicon that Asus has in the Vivobook S15, paired up with 32GB of RAM and a 1TB SSD. And the Snapdragon X Elite is, of course, an ARM-based processor. That does somewhat limit the ways I can benchmark it. My standard here would be PC Mark 10 to allow for direct comparison to a wide range of x86 processors, but despite Microsoft's statement that its Prism emulator would allow for 90% of the apps people use every day being accessible on Copilot plus ARM PCs, PC Mark isn't one of them. More on that shortly. Now, 3D Mark will run, and it's an interesting test to use because its TimeSpy component that I usually use doesn't have an ARM component, so it's running under Prism emulation with a slight performance hit as a result. But it seems only fair under those circumstances to compare it against other Copilot Plus laptops. Here's how it stacks up. Now, it's not surprising that these figures are pretty close because these are systems built on the exact same processors. For PC purposes, GPU power is not a strong point for Snapdragon X Elite systems, so if you're after a heavy-duty video rendering machine, or fancy a little gaming on the side, then you're still better served by an Intel or AMD x86-based laptop in this price category at this time. It's certainly feasible to run GPU-intensive applications on the Vivobook S15, just not all that quickly or all that well. And this gets to the issue with ARM, because despite Microsoft's rather bold claims around compatibility, the reality with ARM is, while it is improving since they announced Copilot, yes, more apps have come on board with native ARM versions, it is still a bit of a guessing game, and I guess it kind of depends on which apps you use on an everyday basis as to whether or not you're going to hit issues, but it can be a guessing game. I have hit apps that start up but don't actually work. I've hit others that just say outright, nope, there's no ARM-compatible version, this just won't run. And that could be a problem for some users. I totally appreciate there are people out there already using these systems and having a whale of a time with them because they work with the apps they want to work with, and that's fine. But it still feels like it's a bit more of a guessing game than it is with x86, and that, I think, is a challenge. The other side of Copilot Plus PCs are, of course, the exclusive AI features, such as live captioning, co-creator for images, and eventually recall for snapshots and system-wide searching. And look, I've talked about this before, I'm not really sold on these on-device AI features yet. I mean, live translation, for example. It's workable for direct conversation in my testing, But if I try to turn it to providing me live captions for TV programs in other languages, it just falls apart so fast. And when you compare it against something like Google Translate, which for sure has its issues with this kind of translation, its mechanical translation is still far from perfect, but it's so much faster, it's so much more accurate, it's so much quicker than the live translation through Copilot Plus PCs can be at this time. Again, AI is an emerging field, it's an improving field. Maybe this will get better, but right now it's not very good at all. And it's kind of the same story for Code-Create. It creates images, sure, and I'm no artist, so it's doing better than I can, but they're still so very clearly AI-based, they're still limited, you still get weird results from time to time. And of course, I can't ignore the fact that I would much rather human artists were creating art. Really, at the end of the day, I get that people are going to use these, same as they will with the writing tools. And obviously, I have a personal bias against writing tools because I'm very much more into human-generated content there. But so far, there's very little to get excited about here, I feel, even if you are into this kind of AI generative space. Recall, at the time of recording this, still isn't available widely, and I'm 100% on board with that because while I'm sure Microsoft has and is working on strengthening its security, it still just feels like such a massive privacy invasion to me that, honestly, I'd be disabling it on any Copilot Plus PC I had to work on in any case. Your mileage may vary. On the battery front, one of the big reasons why you might want to buy an ARM-based Windows laptop over an x86 one is battery life. ARM laptops are typically more power efficient than their x86 equivalents, and I've certainly seen that to date with other Snapdragon X Elite-based systems. Now, battery life is always dependent on app usage, and typically, to give a representative range of that, I'd use a simpler local video playback desk to give me a soft figure, and then contrast that with PC Mark X's gaming battery benchmark to simulate a full-on workload. This is not a gaming PC, but that's a harder test to show what the processor's like when it's under sustained load. And of course, the problem there is PC Mark X won't run, so all I can rely on is that softer video test where I should see some really, really good figures. So the good news here is that the Vivobook S15 OLED managed over 14 hours of video playback, which is pretty solid. For an Intel or AMD-based laptop, that'd be a very respectable kind of score. But if I put it up against the other Snapdragon X Elite-based laptops that I've done the exact same test on, yeah, it's not quite so rosy a picture. It actually falls well short of what some of the other devices I've tested that way have managed. Now, I could make the point that, yes, the Vivobook has a slightly larger screen, but the Surface laptop that I ran the same test through was the 15-inch model. That's not a whole bunch more screen real estate for a lot more battery life. And honestly, this is the biggest drawback for this particular laptop. If you want an ARM-based Windows laptop because of the improved battery life, this will get you through a day, but you can just do a whole lot better. So should you buy the Asus Vivobook S15? Well, look, Microsoft made a lot of promises around Copilot Plus laptops, and Asus's offerings were one of the first to be announced back when it did. Well, certainly one of the first that I was actually able to get a limited bit of hands-on time way back when. But while the prospect of extended battery life and enhanced AI capabilities sounds enticing, to date, the AI benefits have yet to be truly engaging, which leaves Copilot Plus PCs mostly jostling in the battery life arena. And this is a battle that, sadly, the Asus Vivobook S15 rather solidly loses. And I say sadly because out of all the Copilot Plus laptops I've tested to date, the Vivobook S15 has the best design out of any of them. If you can live with its lowered battery life and you're happy to put up with the quirks of ARM-based Windows, it's potentially worth it. But honestly, I'm still really waiting for that one Copilot Plus laptop that feels like it properly ticks all the boxes to make it a must-buy prospect.